Hello, it's Thursday, March 19th, and it would be an A-Day if we're still in class. I'm Mr. Chiaretti, and this is the second video I've made, and hopefully slightly better than the first one. For today's video, I want to talk about the novel we've been reading in class, Midnight Without a Moon. I want to go over the basic plot of the story and talk about the essay we were working on before we were dismissed from school due to COVID-19. So, the book is Midnight Without a Moon. The author is Linda Williams Jackson. I believe it was the first book that she's published so far. It was published in 2017. Our main character or protagonist is Rosalee Carter. And she is a young African-American girl growing up on a sharecropper cabin in Stillwater, Mississippi in 1955. And that is the setting of the story, and that is incredibly significant. And we need to think about why. 1955 is probably almost the peak of violence in the country before the civil rights movement, and Mississippi was one of the epicenters for that. So the setting is incredibly important here, particularly because we're dealing with a protagonist who is African American, and she lives on a sharecropper cabin. So we have to understand what a sharecropper is. Sharecropper is essentially a de facto form of slavery. After the Civil War and the abolishment of slavery, slaves were freed, but after 400 years of being denied education, being denied basic human rights and liberties, they had nothing. So the very same slave owners who no longer could legally own slaves turned around, offered the freed slaves a piece of land in exchange for their work on their fields. So essentially they entered into agreements where they would tend to the landowner's fields, and in exchange they would get a tiny piece of land that they could themselves live on and grow crops on. Now, obviously, being who they were, the landowners would only provide them with the worst pieces of land and would make sure that the people, the sharecroppers, were working so frequently in the fields that they had very little time for their own land. So essentially they were stuck on that land. They could never earn enough money to pay off the debt of having that piece of land, and they lived in constant fear of being kicked off that piece of land. Again, that's why it becomes a form of de facto slavery. De facto in this case meaning something that is not a law, but essentially becomes the case. So that's her basic setup. She's living in Mississippi. She's an African-American girl. She's living in this situation, and she's dealing with a harsh reality. She lives with her grandmother, Ma Pearl, a woman who is both verbally and physically abusive based on textual evidence. There are numerous times in the book where she references backhanding Rosalee. She makes comments about Rosalee. And in fact, the title of the book is a reference to the color of Rosalee's skin, because the book deals with racism, but it also deals with the byproduct of racism, which would be colorism. Colorism is the idea that people of lighter skin are more valuable than those of darker skin. Again, this is a byproduct of racism. Because of years and years of racism, people who were perceived to be closer to white were considered to be more valuable. And this concept plagued people of color because they lived in fear and constant threat of hostility. So Rose, being born incredibly black, was nicknamed or referred to as Midnight Without a Moon. And in her household, she lives with her cousin Queen, who is incredibly light-skinned. And the dynamic that is set up is that Rose is constantly being forced to do incredibly hard labor, working in the fields, scrubbing floors, emptying bedpans, while Queen gets to essentially stay inside and read magazines. And it's constantly brought up that Queen has incredibly fair skin, and she can't do that difficult work because if she did, she would burn. That's part of why Rosalee doesn't like Mississippi. She hates that she has to live in such an unfair situation. Of course, the other part of it is that she has to deal with people like Ricky Turner. Ricky Turner is the town racist teenager. He drives around in a pickup truck attempting to run over young African-American children and oftentimes threatening to kill them. And early on in the book, Rosalee has a run-in with him where he attempts to hit her. She acts out angrily, throws a rock at him without thinking. He stops and makes a direct threat against her life after also using several racist terms against her. So because of this, Rosalee very clearly wants to leave Mississippi. She hates it there. There's nothing for her. And pretty soon, the reasons to leave Mississippi start adding up. Soon after that incident with Ricky Turner, she learns of the murder of the character Levi for registering to vote. And she can't understand this. Why would he be murdered just to register to vote? Ma Pearl offers the excuse that he should have known better. Again, another byproduct of racism, right? She's internalized that racism, that he should have known better. He doesn't have any right to do that. And Rosalee just can't accept that. She just hates it there and she wants to leave. About midway through the book, we dovetail into actual history with the lynching of Emmett Till, the 14-year-old boy from Chicago who was brutally beaten and murdered by two white men who had accused Emmett of whistling at one of the men's sister and the other's wife. It was a fabricated story. The woman who made the accusation much later, I think in 2006, I think it was, might have been even later than that, had said that she had made the story up. But they'd used that for justification for beating this poor child to death, tying a cotton gin around his neck and drowning him in the Tallahatchie River. And that story is a part of Midnight Without a Moon. And it really starts to form part of the basis for Rosalee's change. Because throughout the book, what happens is Rosalee changes from wanting to leave Mississippi to making the decision that everyone wants to leave. And if everyone leaves, who's left to change it? And that's a tough question. And that's a tough responsibility. But by the end of the book, that's the choice that Rosalee makes. She decides that she wants to stay and hopefully make a change. And there are some things that happen with her family as well. Her relationship with Queen changes. She decides that she wants to do something with her family as well. But ultimately, she makes the very tough decision of wanting to stay and try to improve Mississippi for the better. So that's the basic outline of the story. Obviously, I've had to shorten it for the sake of this video. And truth be known, I don't have my book with me because it's on my desk and I'm not allowed back in the school to get it. So I apologize for that. So, an essay. My task for my students originally was to write an essay wherein they would explain how and why Rosalee changes over the course of the novel. So their central argument would be presented in a claim that they would make. Claim is how I basically refer to a thesis statement. And their claims would be something along the lines of, over the course of the novel, Rosalee changes from focusing on what is happening to her and wanting to leave Mississippi to deciding that she needs to stay and make a change. Now, that's a very simplified version of it. And we use that as a skeleton to build off of for all the students to figure out how they can work that into their essays. And we made this a little bit more simple than a 5-paragraph essay. We shortened it down to 4 paragraphs, intro, 2 body, and 1 conclusion. And the idea here was that they could chop that claim into 2 parts. Each part would be a body paragraph. And the first part, in the beginning of the novel, Rosalee focuses on what is happening to her and wanting to leave Mississippi. We would turn that into our first topic sentence. And that's why I structured claims that way, right? Because it gives us a blueprint for the whole essay. So our first topic sentence would deal with that piece. In the beginning of the novel, Rosalee is only focusing on the horrible things that are happening to her and wanting to get out of Mississippi, right? That's our first body paragraph. Having seen that that's what we're focusing on, we now have to go through the book. We find 3 supporting details, quotes from the novel, that would support that topic sentence. And because we're talking about the beginning of the novel, that also helps us in terms of finding our supporting details because that limits us to the first part of the book. So we only have to go through the first 6 or 7 chapters to get those supporting details. And we know we're looking for things that show she's had some difficult things happening to her, which again, if we've read the book, those are pretty easy to find because we can focus on being forced to work in the cotton fields, right? There's a couple of key pieces in there. There's the part where she talks about not being able to take a break because Ma Pearl will beat her. There is the part about feeling like God has taken buckets of heat and just dumps them on her, where she has to get up early to milk the cow while Queen sits inside pretending to be suffering again, right? So there's plenty of that early on, right? And then we need something to support the idea that she wanted to leave. Now, when her biological mother shows up in the novel early on, she's excited because she's hopeful that she will be able to be taken to Chicago with her biological mom. So again, we have a pretty good idea of where to find those details. So the first body paragraph would cover that. Second body paragraph, all right? Second part of the claim. Eventually, something happens that makes Rosalee have a change of heart, decides to stay and try to have a positive change in Mississippi. So we'd have to create a topic sentence, and topic sentence would be something to the effect of, after the death of Emmett Till, or preferably, after the trial for Emmett Till's murderers, Rosalee decides that she needs to stay in Mississippi to try to make a difference there. All right. Now, we need, again, 3 supporting details that would support that. So we would find a supporting detail relating to the trial, right? Something that shows that she is angry that the 2 men get out basically scot-free after that murder. And we need to show that she wants to stay. We've narrowed it down because the trial happens, the murder happens in chapter 17 and 18, right? And the trial happens after that. So we're in the last third of the book. It makes it easier for us to find our supporting details. We're not hunting through 300 and some odd pages, right? So again, makes it easier for us. And then we need to find something that shows she wants to stay. It makes it more simple for us, okay? And essentially follow the same format as the first paragraph. So topic sentence, supporting detail, explain your supporting detail, transition to your next detail, right? And your transitions will be something along the lines of a single sentence that lets the reader know what the next detail is and how it relates to the first one. So after witnessing this, Rosalee decides that what's going on in Mississippi is wrong and somebody needs to do something about it, which would transition us to a detail that shows that Rosalee wants to be the one that does something about it. So that's the basic setup for the essay on this topic. If we were still in class, we could actually break down and look at those details, but we're not. So if you were one of my students and you have your books with you, try to do this second body paragraph. You can type it up. Before we left, I had all of you use Office 365, so you're able to type your first half and put it online. You can share that with me and you can type it up. For anybody who is watching this video who is not a student of mine and wants to know more about the book, please email me. My email will be in the comments. I don't know how to do all those fancy linky things that people who normally do videos do, but I'll put it in the description of the video. You can email me and we can talk about the book and talk about other suggestions. I believe Linda Williams Jackson does have a second book that follows up after Midnight Without a Moon. And given how great Midnight Without a Moon is, I would highly suggest, if you love this book, you definitely got to read the second book. It's an awesome book. And that's it for now. So tomorrow I'll produce another video that is hopefully slightly better than this one too. And for now, have a good day, and I hope everyone's doing well. That's it. And I'm surprised my cat, who's been in the corner sneezing, has not walked in front of me. That's a major milestone. So thank you.